All right, good afternoon, everybody. Hey, Congresswoman.
Morning.
Here we are again. It's particularly relevant. Here we are again, here in Connecticut. What you saw happen in Texas yesterday, almost 10 years to the month that it happened at Sandy Hook, and there are too many eerie similarities. As you see what happened in Texas and what happened 10 years ago here. You saw what happened in Buffalo. You see what's happening in the churches. Susan and I always say, if you see something, say something. And if you see something, say something and do something. And that's what the people of Connecticut have done, and that's what everybody behind me is here. Look, I look at these crimes, I look at these mass shootings. They're somewhat uniquely American, which is tragic. We're uniquely American. I love America, but this should not be our curse. You think, what can we do? Well, many people have said, really, coming out of COVID in particular, but longer term, it's all about mental health. What you can do to make sure that people are safe from themselves, safe to their community. We made the biggest investment in mental health in the history of the state. We have counselors and advisors and shoulders to lean on in all of our schools, particularly our high schools, doing everything we can to head off, what could be very dangerous behavior. Some people have said it's really all about criminal justice and law and order. And look, I take that to heart to some degree. I think for the vast majority of these young people, we got to do everything we can to get them back on track and do everything we can to give them hope. Some of them are really repeat offenders, and we've put in place with a bipartisan bill passed in the legislature this last session. Thank you to each and every one of you. What a difference that will make in terms of making judges know that they can do the right thing for that kid and right thing for the community. And it's also, and here we've got a lot of work to do, about guns. I said at the State of the State, if you're not serious about guns, you're not serious about crime prevention. I think that's more true today than ever before. We've got some work to do there. That AR-15 they used in Buffalo would not be able to be purchased here. We would have background checks, but it doesn't work if we're doing this on our own. We can make a difference, but we really need the federal government to look up and see what's worked in Connecticut and what can work elsewhere. What a difference that can make. And it does make a difference. Down in Georgia and Texas, where it's much easier to carry a gun, much more people carry a gun. You don't need a background check. And the number of shootings and the number of homicides and the number of mass killings is up by a factor of 3, 4, 5 times what it is in our state. If we could just have the rest of the country put in place some of the gun safety laws, the likes of which we have here, we could make things a little bit safer. But in the meantime, I want you to look out for each other. I want you to be a shoulder to lean on. I want you to talk to some of these kids. We're coming up to the summer. We got camps for them, other amazing things to do to get them back on the straight and true. But sometimes a shoulder to lean on, somebody says, I love you, is what's really necessary. Over to you, Susan.
Governor, thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to our legislative colleagues and our commissioners and all of the advocates and parents who lost loved ones who join us today. Governor is right. Here we are again, standing together to demand action after another mass shooting. 19 innocent elementary school kids are dead. 2 teachers are murdered. And sadly, this isn't the first time, as we know all too painfully here in Connecticut. This has happened on college campuses, in grocery stores, at concerts, at churches, and it's happened in schools, it's happened in schools, it's happened in schools, and when is it enough? And what the hell is it going to take to stop this? What is it going to take to have our Congress act? What's it going to take to loosen the NRA's grip on our national legislature? It's a crime that our Congress and our Senate has not acted. And don't tell us that our founding fathers envisioned this when they wrote our Constitution. Don't tell us that ordinary citizens need weapons of mass destruction and AR-15 rifles. If you use the Second Amendment as an excuse, then you're complicit in the murders of our children and of innocent Americans. And so we can't wait another day. Every day that goes by without passing common sense gun legislation is another day of lives lost. And I'm sorry, but none of us want to hear condolences from NRA-supported senators.
Come on now.
In Connecticut, we're doing all we can, but we're not immune. This is a national problem. It's a national issue, and it's going to require a national solution. So today, all of us implore our Congress to pass common sense gun laws to keep our children safe. And we must act for the children of Uvalde. Congress can simply follow Connecticut's lead. We passed a very strong law in the aftermath of Sandy Hook. And we did it for Daniel, we did it for Charlotte and Olivia and Josephine and Anna Grace and Dylan and Madeline and Catherine and Chase and Jesse and James and Grace and Emily and Jack and Noah and Caroline and Jessica and Aviel and Benjamin and Allison and Rachel Davino and Dawn Hochsprung and Anne-Marie Murphy and Lauren Rousseau and Mary Sherlock and Vicky Soto. We will not forget their names. We will not let those beautiful people be forgotten, and we will not wait another day, because the only thing that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing, and that's why I'm so proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our federal legislators, with our governor, with our legislative partners. So to our federal lawmakers, just do your job. It's a matter of life and death.
Good morning. Thank you, Governor and Lieutenant Governor, for your support on this important issue. I'm a survivor of the Sandy Hook school mass shooting that happened in December of 2012. And I was devastated to learn yesterday while I was at work about another school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, at the Robb Elementary School. How can we still be having the same conversations about access to guns after 10 years and 26-year-olds and 6 of my colleagues and coworkers were gunned down in Sandy Hook? I was huddled in a closet with 18 9-year-olds and 3 of my colleagues that day when gunfire shattered the peace at Sandy Hook School. Yesterday, I was right back in that closet, remembering the fear and horror we experienced, trying to be brave for the kids we were with, while we were more frightened than we'd ever been in our lives. My 2 sons were in Newtown High School that day, in their classrooms on lockdown, watching it unfold on TV, texting me, Mom, are you okay? But not getting an answer because I didn't have my phone with me. They didn't know for several hours if I was dead or alive. We had no idea at that time that we would become the single worst mass shooting in modern history. Who could possibly imagine that? I'm one of the lucky ones because I survived. The teachers and staff at Sandy Hook who also survived rallied around the children and the families of our school to try and support them through their journeys of grief and loss and trauma, often putting aside our own trauma and feelings to do that. And now, once again, gun violence has forced its way into our schools, leaving nothing but devastation, trauma, and tragedy in its wake. To the entire community in Uvalde, please know you're not alone in your grief. Unfortunately, we know. We're standing beside you. We understand the pain you must be feeling, and I wish it hadn't happened to you. The 20 deaths here in Connecticut of those children and the 6 colleagues of mine should have been enough. How many more kids have to die in our schools before our federal lawmakers will act? We cannot accept this as the fate of teachers, communities, and families. We all deserve to live without fear, to be safe in school, at the grocery store, at our place of work, and in our neighborhoods, no matter our race, immigration status, or zip code. While we keep the families in Uvalde whose children have died or are waiting still to hear their fate, in our hearts, please also keep the children and adults who survived in your prayers. They too have a long journey ahead. The generational cycle of gun violence and the associated trauma with every instance of gunfire impacts children's abilities to grow, learn, and develop. I'm so thankful to my survivor community, many of whom are here today, and the support they provided as we navigated our own path to be here today. I know I can speak for them when I say to the survivors at Robb Elementary School, we're here for you when you're ready. Here in Connecticut, we're so lucky to have the support of the majority of our elected officials, and we know that the reasonable gun laws put in place before and after the shooting at Sandy Hook have reduced gun deaths here. But the patchwork of state-by-state gun laws endangers us and those in states around us, as the governor pointed out. Now is the time for our federal government to act. I'm sick and tired of this happening time and time again, and I know you are too. Join me in the fight and demand more from our lawmakers than empty thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. My name is Andrew Woods. I'm the Executive Director of Hartford Communities That Care. I'm always, I always welcome the opportunity to be a part of renewed efforts to continue to amplify the need for support to address this issue of gun violence in our communities. What's happened in Texas and elsewhere in Buffalo, you name it, as the speaker before you and those after you have already testified or will testify to, is something I think we should always raise the alarm on related to these mass shootings that take place, especially with young children in our school systems or young children that are just trying to go to school and get educated. I may be the only speaker. Well, I doubt that. I have Congressman Larson behind me, who I know will also speak to some of this, is that we have these mass shootings, but we also have the day-to-day drumbeat of urban gun violence. The efforts that we've been leading since 2004 here in the city of Hartford and quite frankly statewide in our hospital-linked violence intervention program, our team has personally responded to over 1,900 fatal and non-fatal shooting victims here in the city of Hartford alone. Connecting families to services, making sure they get the supports that they need. The aftermath is lifelong, just as it is for any community that is impacted by gun violence. No one gets past this. No one survives the horror of the trauma, the grief. It is truly a lifelong deal that people have to encounter and deal with. And so as we, with the bank of cameras in front of us, from the multiple media outlets, the folks behind us, the advocates and lawmakers, let's continue to make sure we elevate the need to deal with this issue of gun violence in our country, but also equally as important, make sure that those that are impacted by it get the resources and supports to begin with to address the trauma and impact this has on their lives. Thank you for the invite.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I had to walk away. I was on a call with the White House to encourage them to be bold and to support our community and Uvalde community and all the other communities that have been impacted by this horrific tragedy, because it's quite triggering when there's another tragedy. So my neighbor killed 26 children and 6 educators in about a decade ago. And we have been begging Congress to take action for 10 years. And we're hoping that this will be a moment in time when all members of Congress, particularly the Republicans who have been blocking the background check bill, the assault weapons ban bill, the Ethan's law, and many other legislative proposals, and finally take action to save our children's lives. When will it be enough? How many more mass shootings? How many more gun deaths in communities like Hartford and New Haven and Bridgeport? How many more? Buffalo is still suffering. They haven't even buried the dead. Okay, it's time. It's time for Congress to take action. But it's really up to all Americans. Until members of Congress fear voters more than the gun lobby, they won't act.
Yes. Yes.
I encourage all Americans to join us. There are numerous organizations here and nationally that you can join, and you can contact Congress right now. 202-224-3121 is the Congressional switchboard number. I urge all in Connecticut and beyond to dial that number today and urge your members of Congress to take action now. If you've never done it before, don't wait until it impacts you, your family, your neighborhood, your community to take action, because it'll be too late. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Congresswoman Johanna Hayes, and yesterday, when I heard the news of what happened in Texas, even though the news was new, the feeling was exactly the same. It was the same feeling I had 9.5 years ago. I was numb and completely heartbroken, because while shootings and mass shootings and these types of occurrences have become more and more frequent in our communities, it's different when it's a school. It's different when it's children. It feels different and it hits different. And I struggled with that yesterday, because I remembered that day back in December when my kids were asking me, why is this happening? And what are the adults going to do about it? And I felt so completely helpless having those conversations with my students. And now, as a member of Congress in a position to answer all of the questions they asked me and do something about it, I felt equally as helpless. I will, however, remind you, though, that there are 2 houses in Congress, and all of the legislation that you just heard has been passed in the House of Representatives. Yes. We have hundreds of bills that we've passed through multiple committees out of the House of Representatives. We are only able to do that because of the razor-thin majority that we have, because there are enough of us who believe that it is important enough to do this. So all of the legislation you just heard of, hundreds of pieces of legislation, have been passed out of the House and await action in the Senate. I can tell you there is a reluctance to have any conversation that involves anything to do with guns and firearms and policy.
Shame.
I introduced legislation with my colleagues Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Lucy McBath that just says we have to be able to identify what is a school shooting, define it, and collect the data so that we can prevent it. Even that was voted against by my Republican colleagues. Legislation for safe gun storage, for responsible gun ownership. It's like we can't have any conversation. All bets are off when we want to talk about anything that requires having an honest conversation about how we move forward from here. We cannot really want to address this problem if we can't even talk about it. I can tell you that those kids that I had in my class are now adults, And even though they were not in Newtown, they came up in an era where they are still struggling with the trauma of what it means to have survived a school shooting. We have so many kids every day who take drills, who are doing all of these school lockdowns, and they don't even understand or appreciate the reason why they're doing them, because they've always just had to do them as part of their natural course of action. The thing that we've heard over and over the last couple days is this doesn't happen in other countries. So it is not enough to say it is gun violence, it is mental health, it is community. Other countries have mental health issues. Other countries have gun violence issues, but other countries act decisively at the moment where anything happens and ensure that it never happens again. So while I am a woman of faith, and I will always, always pray for the people who are most impacted, I will always pray to touch the hearts and minds of the people who don't want to move, I recognize that right now that is not enough. And that is a very difficult thing for me to say, because in my world, prayer is always sufficient. Amen. But we also have a responsibility as the adults to be able to answer the questions that children are asking with action. I am so fortunate to live in a state that has a governor and a legislature who, like me, believes these things and conducts themselves accordingly. Yes. But nationally, that is not happening. So we have to take the energy and the momentum, the resilience and the determination that is here in Connecticut to the national stage. I heard Nelba Marquez Green this morning on CBS, and she said, do not confuse my faith with my action. Because while I will continue to pray, I will act in a way that is committed and honors the memory of my daughter. We cannot leave her and the other families to do this alone. So I thank the governor for doing this, and I am just completely broken. Completely broken. Because if I couldn't do anything from the classroom and I can't do anything from Congress, then who can do something? If not me, then who? If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Johanna. Governor, Lieutenant Governor, members of the General Assembly, thank you for your due diligence here in the state of Connecticut. But especially having heard from Marianne and Poe and Adam and all those assembled here, you are an inspiration to us all. Well, let's cut to the chase. Paul Murray down in Washington, D.C. said, I am tired of the filibuster. That's the whole point here. Why? This year alone, 145 days have passed, over 200 mass shootings across the country. This is epidemic. And when you add in what Adam, and I know Deb Davis is here from Mothers United Against Violence, when you add in the fact of what's going on with gun violence in general, and for the United States Senate not to have voted in over a decade, that is a disgrace. That is not what this great country of ours is all about. Thank God for Governor Lamont and Susan Bicewicz in the Connecticut General Assembly, who responded in the way a legislative body should. But to somehow hide behind the filibuster and cloture vote. There are more than 400 bills that have passed the House of Representatives that have not been taken up by the United States Senate because of Mitch McConnell and the filibuster rule. Now, let me be honest about this. Democrats were guilty of this as well. Thank God we have two United States senators who who are down there fighting on behalf of repealing the filibuster and having United States senators do what they were elected to do and vote. We are not asking for anything complicated here. All we're asking is that the legislation that passes a House be taken up in the United States Senate. And that's where the people of this country have to get involved. All too often people talk about Congress. Yes, it is a body and it is called Congress. But there are two houses. And in one chamber, we are doing the people's work and responding the way the public has asked. The biggest threat to our democratic republic isn't Russia or China. It's not homegrown terrorism or terrorism around the world. It's when the duly elected people do not carry out the goals and commitments they made to the people they are sworn to serve. It's our obligation to vote, end the filibuster, do the right thing, and vote.
So we will only be taking on-topic questions. And so we appreciate our media partners coming, and we'll take questions.
Absolutely. We're close. We're at the 10-yard line. We elected a gun safety president. We elected a gun safety House of Representatives, and we have a narrow majority in the Senate. All we need is to elect 2 more senators who's willing to end the filibuster, and we can pass many of the legislative proposals that we have been, advocating for all these years. And as you can see from behind me, after Sandy Hook, the movement has grown significantly. Newtown Action Alliance was formed, Sandy Hook Promise, Moms Man Action, and CAGV is stronger than ever before. We have worked really hard in the state of Connecticut. We have an amazing, amazing governor, lieutenant governor, and state legislature who have done the hard work here in the state, and many other states have done the same. But there is an effort to regress in other states, to pass permitless carry laws and to pass stand your ground laws. But you know what? We're here standing together to fight them. And then we have survivors here. We have Kristen Song and Mike Song and other survivors who are now fighting on a federal level to pass bills like Ethan's Law. And in fact, Kristen has met with over 100 Republican offices in the House to urge them to vote for Ethan's Law. And although we only have one Republican who has said that he would support the bill, we have the votes to pass Ethan's Law right now, this moment, in the House of Representatives. And we are waiting for us to get a vote. So thank you, Kristen, for all your hard work. Sadly, she had to lose a child to do that work, but we hope that others will join our movement. There are a lot of groups here. Okay, people in Connecticut, if you have not been impacted by gun violence yet, you may be, or you are going to know someone else, right, in your family or neighborhood or elsewhere, who will be impacted by gun violence. And we just beg all of you to take action. Okay, it starts with contacting your congressional members. Make them fear you more than the gun lobby. It's time. It's really time, and I am optimistic. We have to change. Okay, we can't live like this. We shouldn't have to live like this. Okay, the Constitution gives us the right to live. And the number one job of our Congress is to protect its citizens. They need to act now, and we urge everyone to urge them to act right now. The time is now to do it.
Susan, I just want to say, Ethan's Law is a really easy example because the argument is always we're trying to take people's guns away. Ethan's Law just says if you own a gun, you have to store it responsibly. This should be something that we can all agree on, that if you are a gun owner, you need to be a responsible gun owner, and we can't even get consensus there. And that's the point I was trying to make. Any conversation around gun rights, gun ownership are off the table. If we can't even have a conversation that says if you own a firearm and there's a possibility that it will be in the proximity of a child, then you are responsible for storing that. If we can't even have that conversation, we're not getting any movement. And that's where we are now, where any conversation about gun ownership, responsible gun ownership, is received as an attack on Second Amendment rights, and that's not what it is. It's just saying if you choose to own a gun, these are some of the things you have to do as part of that ownership responsibility. In Connecticut, yes. Yes.
Governor, the legislature basically ignored your proposals for gun safety measures this session under threats of filibuster. Are you in a position now to call a special session to go after some of the things you wanted, like X number of weapons purchased within a month, and asking for allowing police to ask open carry people for their permits in public?
Well, first of all, let's talk about what we did pass on a bipartisan basis in terms of real criminal justice. Steve Stafford was back there. The deal that we were able to get done on a bipartisan was, I think, important, but not enough. And I was very disappointed that there was no mention of guns. Look, I can tell when a prohibition isn't working, when there's the only things that have lost cost in this over the last 6 months, the only thing that are less expensive today than they were 6 months ago are fentanyl and illegal guns on the street. There's so many illegal guns on the street right now. And I'd like to think that we could have done a better job here in Connecticut and sent a message far afield, especially when it comes to those ghost guns that are there to kill people, ghost guns that are there so they can't be detected through TSA, ghost guns that are there without a serial number just for the wrong purposes. If we can't outlaw that, we're in trouble.
Are you in a position to call a special session or not?
I'm not there yet. Let me think about that. I would say that as a parent, we've been there. My kids were there in and around 9/11, and you let go of that hand very cautiously. I would tell you, have confidence in our state police, James Ravella and Colonel Malikas, and our superintendents of schools. I would have confidence that they're doing everything we can to strengthen and harden our schools. Millions of dollars there from a physical point of view. More resource officers, more counselors, more police patrols. And there's a lot of bad information out there. Call your superintendent, call your local police chief. They'll tell you what's happening in that particular school. We worked really hard during COVID to make our schools some of the safest places you can be. And we're going to do the same thing in this environment as well.
Now back to the special session, Governor. Are you saying you wanted to count the votes first? I wasn't clear on what you said. That you're not there yet. What do you mean by that?
I got to see if something has changed. I pushed pretty hard on the ghost guns in particular and the illegal guns. I couldn't get that through. Maybe the world has changed. Let me talk to a couple of the legislators.
Well, why couldn't you get it through?
Why couldn't we get the guns done? Yeah. I think it's become an incredibly partisan argument right now in our society. It wasn't that way 30, 40 years ago. So that is disturbing. Even a state like Connecticut, where after Sandy Hook, we had strong bipartisan support. Guns are dangerous. The illegal guns are out there to kill, and we got to do a better job there.
What more can be done here in Connecticut? What more can be done to make it tougher? What more can be done to get more votes for it?
Well, I'll rely on maybe James would like to speak to that as well. Let me start working with my fellow governors. These borders are pretty porous when it comes to guns. I got stuff coming down from the North Country. I got illegal guns coming up from Georgia in the South as well. It's pretty easy to ship that stuff in here. What I can do on a regional basis with our gun task force, led by Commissioner Ravella, that makes a difference in terms of at least being able to source the big gun dealers out there and go after them. Then I need the feds to step up. I need Congress to step up. I need people doing the right thing, you know, like John and Johanna and our entire delegation have done. And we got to get it done in the Senate. Well, it never heals. It never heals. And, you know, as a parent who had a kid at Sandy Hook, you look 10 years later and you're shaking your head. Said, I can't believe those kids in Texas were at the exact same risk as my kids were at Sandy Hook. What have we learned? And I think we just wake up, we dust ourselves off, and we're going to get this done. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did great. Yeah, you shut everybody up real quick. Good. Good job. I know. We're all good. Close it up. It's just your presence.